Ow! Greetings, you. We have yet another book review. Now, today, what I'm going to be reviewing is actually a book I read, about a month ago. I had been meaning to do this book review, but because I tend to be lazy, I put it off for God knows how long, and finally got around to doing this. So, this book's been out for about a month and a half now, and of course, it's done by a very well-known author, Miss Anne Rice. And I'm doing this review because this is special, because it is the first book that she has written in her Vampire Chronicles since the last one, which was Blood Canticle, which was actually meant to conclude her Vampire Chronicles. This, of course, is Prince Lestat. Of course, you notice that because you're looking right at the screen. So this book, like I said, is the first she's written in her Vampire Chronicles in a long time. I know that Anne Rice had been going through a lot of personal changes and things like that ever since she had finished up her Vampire Chronicles. And from what I know, and from what I read of all her Vampire Chronicles, when she started nearing the last few books, even I have to admit, looking at those particular stories, it just didn't seem like her heart was in it. So, yeah, like Merrick and Blood Canticle and Blood and Gold and those Blackwood Farm, those from what I heard, since I only read Merrick, but I didn't read those others, but I have a friend of mine who's an avid fan of her books. And they said, like I said, her heart didn't seem to be in it. She really was, they just really were not as good as all the others. Now, I've, of course, read the essential first four books, Interview of the Vampire, Lestat, Queen of the Damned, well, actually, the first three, essential three. I also read Tale of the Body Thief, and I read an abridged version of Him Knock the Devil. Now, I tried going back and reading the unabridged version, but I just couldn't get into it. I also read some of the Vampire Armand, but that one as well, I just really couldn't get into. But I did read Vittorio the Vampire, and once again, that one was not all that good. It was okay. I see what she was trying to do, maybe do other vampire stories, where other vampires are just not connected to the ones that were directly linked to Lestat and Louis. But that really didn't really interest me all that much either. But when I learned that she was making a new book, and another book centered on her, of course, titular vampire, Lestat, I really had to go ahead and check this out. And of course, the book was getting fairly positive reviews. For those of you who have been looking it up or have been kind of straddling the fence about whether or not to read it, I'm hoping this will get you a little more interested in it. Now, before I even start, I will warn you, there are going to be some minor spoilers, very small ones. I'm going to keep this as clean as possible because there are some beyond huge reveals in this book. And the way it ends, well, the way it ends is pretty quiet, but what happens near to the ending is just like, wow. So I'm going to try to keep this as clean as possible, folks. So what we have here is that Prince Lestat, it takes place about a decade after the events of Blood Canticle. What's going on in this particular book is that there's a strange event that is causing chaos in the vampire world. I'm kind of wondering if I should even reveal this, because the problem is this, and I want to talk about this. I was able to figure out the big mystery pretty early on in the story. I pretty much said, "Oh yeah, that's," and I was right. I was dead right. And so I don't know whether or not to say exactly what this event is that's causing chaos in the vampire world. So let's just let you know that there's a lot of deaths going on in the vampire world, and a lot of vampires that have been dormant for a long period of time, even through the incidents of Queen of the Damned, are coming to life. Many of them, which are revealed to have direct connections to many of the characters that have been prominent in at least the first 4 books. There's a lot of characters coming to light, ones that were, I guess you could say, mentioned in passing, or we might not have known who they were, and they're brought to the forefront as these events come to a grand culmination, of course, once again surrounding Lestat. Now, the good thing about this book is that it plays out a lot like Queen of the Damned. If you remember reading, if any of you have read Queen of the Damned, you know how it started off with, stories from all these other vampires, and all of it had a purpose, which culminated in the ending events where Lestat and Maharet and Louis and Cayman and all the others had confronted Akasha and ultimately had to kill her, and then Makari appears, having been missing for thousands of years, and took in the primal blood. Now, and becoming the new queen of the vampires so that the vampire race could survive. So there is a little bit of history for you guys who are slightly unfamiliar with the vampire stories. But this starts off after a period of time where Lestat has gone underground again to recover from his weariness of the human race and of life. Which was kind of interesting because he had stayed underground for several decades, I think from like the 1930s, if memory serves, up to the 1980s. And I guess not too long after the events of Queen of the Damned, he went back underground again, I think sleeping from like the 90s up until the 2010s. Because the story takes place in the year 2013. So Lestat becomes the focal point of everything that's going on in the story. But like Queen of the Damned, the story is told from multiple points of view. Each chapter is told from a different character's perspective and something that's going on in that world, all events leading up to where Lestat is. And many of these characters, as I said, are both characters we are familiar with, like David Talbot, Marius, let me see, what was that girl's name? I keep forgetting. Jesse Reeves, and a plethora of other vampires that are both new to the tale, and some, as I said, were people who were either thought to have long been dead or are newcomers on the scene. Many of them are very interesting characters because they're ones that were mentioned in passing, like I said, in other stories. But Anne Rice gets a chance to really build on those characters. There's one in particular that we had not seen since Interview with the Vampire. It was pretty much a character that was at first thought to be a throwaway character, and there becomes a lot more to him than it seems. And also she manages to put in some very fascinating new characters, among which, and I forget his name right off the top of my head, but it's a duo of vampires, one who was turned in more recent decades, the other who's thousands upon thousands of years old. But they're scientists, and they had been for years studying the physical makeup of vampires to understand what makes them tick. And it does answer a big question of why hadn't vampires ever tried to do this for a long time, tried to learn about what makes them tick. These vampires actually dared to study this. But in the story, it's kind of explained that that kind of practice was put a stop to and was kind of suppressed. But these two were the more daring ones and decided to go ahead and do this and pursue, science to understand what makes them what they are. And they managed to do something pretty incredible. But I don't want to spoil that for you because that's a huge thing. And it also involves another new character, an adopted daughter of Lestat, who seems to have been a magnet for trouble throughout her life. This poor girl's life is just plagued with so much misfortune. And I don't want to reveal too much about her, but her destiny becomes a big thing in this book. Not quite as big as I'd hoped. It seems to me like Anne Rice had put her in there because she has other plans. From what I'm reading on Wikipedia, there is supposed to be another book coming after this called Blood Paradise. So I don't know when it's supposed to be coming out. So I can't wait to see what Anne Rice plans to do with these new characters, and also other characters that are only talked about in passing even in this book, but it seems to hint that they're going to have a bigger role as the story progresses. Now, of course, the big focal point for this book is Lestat, because major things happen involving him, involving the vampire race, involving this crisis that is causing so much havoc in the vampire world. And trying to see where I was going with this. Oh, and so because of this, Lestat ends up going through a lot of changes. Now, here's where I have a slight issue with the book, and it's really not a personal issue of mine, but it's where I understand that some people might not like it, because it causes Lestat to go through a very fundamental change in what he used to be. If you liked your Lestat being the devil-may-care, brash, impulsive, no one's going to tell me what to do, brat prince, as they love to call him, then you might be pretty upset with how the story ends. It's hard for me to say anything more. It's hard for me to say anything about the book because I'm doing this with such trepidation. I don't want to give away too much. But fans of the bad boy Lestat are probably going to feel like somebody killed their best friend. I'm just giving you fair warning. But all in all, the book has been receiving very good reviews as of late, and personally, I loved it. Anne Rice has managed to bring her Vampire Chronicles back to life. She has put together a big epic tale that brings together old characters, new characters, and breathes new life into the old ones, and makes some very interesting new characters. Now, another issue I might have is just simply that the crisis in general that is going on almost seems distant at times. It's not until nearer to the end of the book that you really do see just how dire the situation is, and it really is after the big reveal of the book. Then you realize, oh my God, this is really, really bad. Before that time, you're just wondering, what is going on here? You see vampires fleeing, and so that's a lot of what the chapters with all these other vampires are. The effect of this thing, this crisis on each and every one of these vampires that are fleeing or coping in whatever way they can. And it only seems to get really serious near to the end when some particular characters that are very well known in the books are killed. Once again, read the book. But like I said, sometimes it just feels like that crisis, the cause of it, and the thing what's going on feels like it's far away in the background. But maybe, on a second thought, I think that this was done on purpose because Anne Rice was introducing that slow burn. So it does kind of take a little bit to rev up as the story progresses, but thankfully, Anne Rice's writing style, if any of you have ever read any of her books that you very well know, is one that really knows how to pull you into the tale. And sometimes she can get lost in her own descriptiveness, but knows how to pull you back into the action just at the right time. So her writing style in this has not changed. It's still wonderful. The story is engaging. New characters, old ones given new life. A new crisis for the vampire race. Oh, and one more thing. I like how she integrates modern technology in this one. She really is putting the reader into the age in which the story takes place. The same as in Queen of the Damned, where everything was the whole glitz and glamour and music videos and stuff. That was a big thing back in the 80s. When she pulls us into the modern era, she really knows how to talk about the usage of technology. There's a vampire that has an internet radio show. And Lestat, there's this part where Lestat is mentioned. He's always having to be reminded of how to use a cell phone and how to use apps and stuff like that. And it's not done in a way that just feels like she's forcing it in. It flows in really naturally with everything that's going on in the story. So on the whole, like I said, I personally loved this book. I think that despite the fact of the changes that you see Lestat go through in this story, on the whole, everything plays out wonderfully in a really triumphant return to the dark world of her Vampire Chronicles. And I cannot wait for the next book to come out. It was really a breath of fresh air for Vampire Chronicles, and something that it was like returning to an old friend. I had a friend of mine. She's the one who got me into the Vampire Chronicles, and I really loved this probably because of these books that I actually started getting more into vampire stories. I first watched the movie Interview with the Vampire, and also my friend was a big fan of Anne Rice, and so I got into that, and I really liked the world that Anne Rice wove, and I really like what she does with this particular book, and it seems like she has not lost her touch. So I can't wait to see what happens in the next book, and I very strongly recommend this particular book, Prince Lestat, for anyone who is a fan of vampire books, of course, and of course a fan of the Anne Rice books. Now, I will have to warn you, for those of you who have not read any of the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles, I recommend you go back and at least read the first 3 or the first 4. Interview with the Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned, and Tale of the Body Thief. You don't have to read Tale of the Body Thief, but things for some characters may be a bit better understood. And you probably the first 5, really, you would probably want to have read Memnoch the Devil, because Lestat does mention things that happened in that book as well. So I think that's about it. I mean, there's a lot more I could tell you, some really big things that happen in this book, but I want to try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. But like I said, great book, excellent, highest recommendation, would read again. And so I hope you guys go out and check it out if you're really into vampire books or want to go ahead and read some more of Anne Rice's wonderful work. So any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, keep it civil. Trolls will be left with part of my shoe stuck in their bummy parts. And so that's it for me, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. Comment, rate, subscribe once again. And once more, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. And as always, stay lucky and stay blessed. Take care.